zones in SharePoint. See, actually, this topic was required only in SharePoint 2007 because in SharePoint 2007, a given web application would support only one type of authentication. It would either support Windows authentication or it would support forms based authentication. Both would not be supported, unlike what I have just shown you in the previous video. But in SharePoint 2010 and of course now in 2013, because of claims based authentication, in the same web application we have a choice of either this or that. But still, because it is there as a topic, let us understand little more in detail what is zones concept. So in SharePoint we can have up to 5 zones and the names of them can be given as default, intranet, internet, extranet and some custom. All zones will be using the same content database. So I will now have a copy of the same web application for different zones, and for each zone I am going to create a separate authentication mechanism. I'm going to configure, let us say for one zone, something like internet, I would probably allow anonymous user and use forms based authentication. But for intranet, I would only enable Windows authentication. And for each zone, we can probably have a different URL, different application kind of thing. But all of these things are going to make use of the same content database. That is very important. The data is shared, different web applications under different zone, but ultimately common content. So for example, we may want to have our web application, which is a corporate site for internal users, accessible to few of our other customers as well. Application that is currently working on Windows authentication in the default zone will have to be duplicated in extranet zone. And for this duplicated version, maybe we would enable forms based authentication, so that the users who do not work in our network, that means their identity does not exist in our Active Directory domain controller, for those users forms based authentication will work and they will have access to the site using they will have access to the site. So how to do this? We will have to use this option, extend web application. So go to central admin, manage web applications, select the web application and use the option extend. Read that, extend an existing web application if you need to have separate IIS websites that expose the same content to user. This option is typically used for extranet deployment where different user access content using different domains. It reuses the same content database for the selected web application. So it's going to create a new web application, but its content database will be same. And when I say new web application, it also means the new IIS website is going to be created. So new content database, new website, new web application, new website, and same content database as SharePoint 10,000. And here now create a new website. So let's say this is 10,001 port number, and you want to allow anonymous access or not. Here I may probably check this, uncheck this and check this, and here provide FBA membership provider, role provider. Just reconfirm. Role provider, membership provider. Good enough. So I uncheck Windows authentication and I check forms based authentication. For SharePoint, port number is different. Click on OK. Of course, you should note here zone is intranet. Your choice. You can call it as internet. See, these are just names. It's up to you how you want to use those zones and the corresponding URL. So I'll call it as, let's say, intranet. Click on OK once again. And now go to SharePoint site. Just change to 1001. It will not show you the drop down. It will directly provide you a facility for logging in. You're not connected to a network. What is this? Close the browser and try once again. Start new instance. Paste. It's giving error. Access is denied. Oh yes, we haven't given access to any user. So that now we'll have to select this user policy. Add user for the intranet zone. Next, give your user underscore 01 full control, finish. Okay. Now go back to browser, refresh. At least one user has permission now. So it should not give me access is denied. Instead, it should give me a form. Perfect. So now log in as user underscore 01. And maybe after logging in as user underscore 01, you might give more permissions. And you'll see that in this particular application also, we get the same list and libraries which we created for actually SP demo server 10,000. That is going to indicate, that is going to show that both are using the same content database. Here it is. Same site, same content database, same lists, everything is same. So yes, what we can actually do, you should have understood by now. This port number 10,000, we can probably allow Windows authenticated user, and port number 10,001 we will expose to probably a different set of users through internet. In one we may allow anonymous user, in the other we may not allow anonymous user. So it's just the URL which is different, but their content database is one and the same. In one Windows application, the original, I may allow only Active Directory users, whereas in the other zone I may allow only forms based authenticated user. But again I repeat, this is not needed from SharePoint 2010 onwards, because in the same web application we have the facility of enabling both at a time. This was not there in 2007, hence we had these facilities of zones to be created. In 2007, one web application would support only one authentication mechanism, multiple it would not support. But with claims based authentication we have this advantage, and hence we don't need this particular feature. And of course the same thing is given in the notes here. Zones, to extend the web application, these are the steps we followed. Then we added users policy. Repeat the same for adding multiple users in case you want to. And finally now creating alternate access mapping. Now what is alternate access mapping? Alternate access mapping is creating a map, created to map a different URL. Say instead of using this, we may want to create and access that same site using this URL. So how to create a access map for this? So for this we'll have to go to central admin, application management, configure access mapping. Let's do that. Central admin, application management, configure alternate access mapping, and here we'll have to provide the alternate access mapping like we have got right now this URL for this. And here now click on, see first you can click on edit public URLs and you can specify here alternate access mapping collection. I selected 10,000 and for 10,000 we have got default zone, intranet zone only. We did not create other zones, but in case we want we could have created. After this go to add internal URL and here specify something like, let's say http colon www dot say something like test.com and select to which zone should it map to. Let's say intranet zone. Click on save and you'll see here test.com is mapped to this. So outside people can now use this. Of course the DNS entry should map this domain name to the IP address of this particular machine. So whether we use this or we use this, it's one and the same. That's what is given here. Now finally, before we close this particular chapter, I would like you to visit this URL. Now I have shown you how manually you can configure the configuration files of how to create a provider, membership provider, role provider, and how to do configuration of each web application. I have shown you all these things manually. Now if you go to this particular link, here is a beautiful walkthrough. Of course it is for SharePoint 2010, but the same steps are followed here. Beautiful walkthrough of how somebody can do it through IIS. You don't have to basically edit the configuration file manually. So just follow this. As I said, first ASP.NET underscore SQL. Of course here it is 2.0 version, you may have to change it to 4.0 version. SQL Server, same thing. It is doing it through Management Studio. First created a database, then configure central admin, go to IIS, select the central admin. Like here you'll have to select central admin, and you see because we configured there, you will see now here providers. Double click. We have ASP.NET SQL role provider. Change here users ASP.NET underscore FBA membership provider, FBA role provider. Rather you can add here, click add, and here you can provide all the data. So from here you can create provider rather than doing the way I taught you. The reason I have taken that particular approach is it gives you more clarity of what is actually happening behind the scene rather than simply using the facilities of the wizard over here. Just give the type, what type of provider, SQL role provider is what we need, and then give a name, connection string. Before this you should have created a connection string. For that here you have the connection strings option. You can add a new connection string. So first create connection string, then create providers, blah blah blah, all that can be done, and decent walkthrough for you is on this particular URL in case you are interested. And of course if you are not an administrator, if you are not a developer and if you are an administrator, you might prefer this approach over the approach which I took. But at the same time now you are very clear about what is going to happen when all this configuration is done, so that in case of any issue tomorrow it will be easy for you to do debugging. Same things, exactly same thing. Enable Windows authentication, enable forms based authentication, all the steps, username, blah 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 blah. Please follow this. Thank you.